Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Stacy Donohue. I am a Director of Investments at Omidyar Network. Omidyar Network is a philanthropic investment firm that was founded by Pierre Omidyar, who is the founder of the global online marketplace company eBay, and his wife, Pam. A philanthropic investment firm means that we make both for-profit investments and nonprofit grants across a number of initiatives, all thematically linked around empowering individuals to make a difference in their lives and the lives of those around them. One of our initiatives is government transparency and public innovation. And as part of that initiative, we have been avid supporters of OGP since its inception. We believe very strongly in the role of civil society in coming together with government to solve large problems. And in fact, this summit, of course, is a fantastic opportunity to bring together civil society and government to work on exactly that problem. So what in the world do startup for-profit companies have to do with this whole thing, and why are we here? Dr. Mo Ibrahim this morning said, "Where is business? They should be here." Well, here they are, a small selection of them anyway. So the point of this panel is really to talk about the role of for-profit startup companies in this space. As a grant-making institution, Omidyar Network has supported many of the fantastic civil society organizations who are attending the summit this week. But at the same time, and as many of you know who are civil society leaders, there's a finite pool of philanthropic capital available to support this sector. So what I'd like to suggest is that in addition to a very robust civil society in this sector, we also need a role for for-profit companies that are trying to improve and enhance the relationship between citizens and government while also finding a sustainable financial model. So the goal of this panel is to hear from 3 entrepreneurs who are trying to attempt this dual mission in countries as diverse as US, Mexico, and India, as well as hearing from an investor who is working with entrepreneurs in this space to help them get up and going. So my hope is that for those of you who are in civil society, this panel will make you think about the complementarity of the work that you do with the work that for-profit startups can do in this space. For those of you who are government officials, I'm hoping this might inspire you to think about ways you might engage with for-profit startups. And for those of you who are civic entrepreneurs yourselves, I hope that you'll find new colleagues to look to for support and sharing of war stories. So each of the panelists will do a brief introduction to his or her company, and then we'll have a panel discussion, including audience Q&A. And I'd really like this to be very interactive. We're a pretty cozy group here, so please start thinking about the questions you'd like to ask. So first, we're going to hear from Keya Dannenbaum. Keya is the founder and CEO of ElectNext. ElectNext is a US-based company that believes that a thriving press is fundamental to an engaged and informed public. Keya studied and worked in politics as a Stanford undergrad and Princeton PhD candidate, internationally as a Fulbright scholar in Colombia and in India, nationally in the US 2008 presidential election, and locally for the mayor of New Haven, Connecticut. And she's currently on leave from the Wharton School getting her MBA. So Keya's political and civic roots really run deep, which has strongly influenced the direction of her business. So please help me in welcoming Keya Dannenbaum.
Thank you, Stacy. Good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for coming. As Stacy said, my name is Keya Dannenbaum. I'm the founder and CEO of ElectNext, and we are a company on a mission motivated by this question: what kind of world would we live in if every person were equipped to be an informed, engaged citizen? We are a small team of passionate, civic-minded entrepreneurs. It might be worth noting that none of us has previous experience in business. And we firmly believe, as Stacy said, that a thriving press is the route to that informed and engaged public. So to that end, we have worked for the last 2 years with a deep and wide network of news publishers across the United States, from top nationally recognized publications to hyper-local outlets. Most of that work over the last 2 years has involved providing these papers with free, open data-powered widgets that they could add to articles to harness the power of data to enhance the storytelling of the news. But in that time, working with publishers, we learned, very importantly, that the core problem for online news publishers, above any other, is revenue. And that decline in revenue is heralding a world with fewer journalists, fewer investigative bureaus, fewer local papers. So we thought to ourselves at ElectNext, can we create a product for news that is not only free, like what we've been doing for the last 2 years, but that is actually revenue generating, and crucially, can we generate that revenue in a way that doesn't smack of advertising, but that instead actually furthers our mission of building that informed and engaged public? So we, of course, think that the resounding answer to those questions is yes, and very recently we rolled out something new. It's a product that we call Featured Perspectives. Another way to think about this is sponsored debate. That slide is not appearing quite as it should, so let me explain. Here's how the model works. We have built two sides of a marketplace. News outlets on the one hand, like I showed you before, and issue expert organizations on the other. And the way it works is when a news outlet in our network publishes an article of topical relevance to one of the expert organizations in our network, that organization has the opportunity to add substantive commentary to that article for a placement fee. Up to 2 such experts or organizations may add their commentary on any given article side by side. So what publishers get out of this arrangement is a share of that revenue. And what readers get out of this is not just the opportunity to read a news story, but also the opportunity to access the debate. So to give you a concrete visual, this is what a featured perspective might look like on an actual news page. So you can see there's the body of the news article. The perspective lives just underneath it. It is outside the editorial. It is written for the article. The author is a stakeholder on the issue, and it is clearly marked. So it's a fairly new model for us, but the early results are encouraging. For news outlets, revenue from featured perspectives on a per article basis is 30 times what they are getting for any other below article monetization unit. For our commentators and debaters, they are seeing 50 times the engagement on a featured perspective that they could expect from any other paid placement on a newspaper. And most importantly for us, that 50x engagement indicates that readers are actually finding this content valuable. So in short, that is ElectNext. We believe that a thriving press undergirds an informed and engaged public, and we are working on innovations to business models for news that support that mission. So really quickly before I finish, Stacy asked us to just say a word on why we took the for-profit route to mission fulfillment. And I'll just say that as a for-profit startup, and in particular in our case as a venture-backed startup, our primary imperative is to grow. And the expectation, the bet that we're making and that our investors are making, is that we have a model that can grow exponentially. And for me, it's that atmosphere of growth that is fundamentally motivating on a personal level, on a company level, and ultimately, I believe that if, as a for-profit civic startup, your business model and mission really are aligned, then the imperative for business growth is ultimately inextricable from mission fulfillment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keya. So next we have Alejandro Maza, founder and CEO of OPI, Open Intelligence. OPI is a Mexico City-based company with a mission to rebuild trust between citizens and government. Alejandro is a graduate of the prestigious ITAM in Mexico, earning degrees in economics and applied mathematics. Recently, he was named one of Mexico's top innovators by MIT Technology Review. Alejandro is also director of Yo Propongo, an NGO in this space, so he has particular experience in building both for-profit and nonprofit civic organizations and interesting insights from making that transition. So help me welcome Alejandro.
Thanks. Thank you, Stacy. Well, we're at OPI, we're a civic startup working on developing technological tools that can allow citizens to better interact with the governments. But our real mission is to rebuild the trust between citizens and governments. And that's not a technical problem, it's an adaptive problem, and we have to keep working on it and find ways to actually build long-lasting relationships. As Stacy said, we started 3 years ago with an NGO called Yo Propongo, and the basic idea was that us as citizens have a lot of information about the social issues we face every day, but the government doesn't really have all this information. And there are no efficient channels to communicate all this data, all this information back to the government. So we said, why don't we use technology to build these channels? And our first model had these very simple steps. It first engage the citizens and ask them to send in their ideas. That was fairly easy to do once we used the channels that were natural to the citizens. Then it was like extract key insights from all this information. And we used a lot of statistical tools and technology to manage to analyze thousands of ideas in video formats, in audio formats, tweets, Facebook posts, whatever, in order to extract all this information. And if we had valuable information, the third step was to go to government and show to them all these insights, all this information, and make them take action on some of the issues. And if the government did that, then everyone was happy and they had better public policy and they could address the issues the public was facing in a more efficient way. But we also found out that sometimes we would engage the citizens, we would get we would get feedback from them, but the government couldn't act on it. And what that created was everyone was kind of disappointed. And we started seeing that people didn't trust our platform anymore, and they didn't trust technology in order to have like a social impact. So we started seeing a backlash, on what the impact of technological tools could be. And after analyzing this, we saw that on the action part, that was the most crucial part, there were some key people inside the government who were crucial for this to actually go through. And these were the public innovators, and public innovation has been in debate a lot for the past week. And we saw that if we could harness all these people and actually make sure we worked with them, we could ensure that the civic engagement wouldn't go to waste and we could actually find some action done. And so what we did about 18 months ago was change our model and try to bring this final but crucial step to the front of the process and start engaging with the public innovators before we engaged with the citizens in order to build trust. So what we do right now is we actually sit with government and try to figure out how to help them solve or plan their most challenging public policy. And then they pay for the whole process. We talk to them and then we engage citizens in a manner that's actually more natural for citizens. We are able to reach all the citizens involved with the public policy, not just the ones that are already politically active. And then we analyze all this information and make it public to the government and to the citizens in order for this to translate into actions. And the main key here is that if all this works, the governments are happy and the citizens are happy and we are happy. But most important, how can we make sure that this technology and this process isn't used just to like misguide the citizens or to promote public policy that the government's already using, planning on doing, but doesn't have the citizen support. So, and we found out that by making everything open and being really transparent about the whole process, we give power back to the people. And if we give all this information back to the people at the end of the process, at the end they can ask the government and demand their government for the public policy they need, not for the one that governments think they should be giving. And this is an example of what we're doing. This was a collaboration at the beginning of the year with the state of Guerrero, the city of Acapulco, and the federal government. And we actually used the people from the same neighborhoods to engage their fellow neighbors and ask them, how could we improve drug and violence prevention policy? We got almost 15% of the total population of the neighborhood involved. These are like 4 very conflicting neighborhoods in Acapulco where the government hadn't been able to engage with citizens, and we got a ton of valuable insight from them. And now the government is using this to plan public policy and to improve their programs there. And the most important, we built a permanent relation with the neighbors so they can evaluate and demand this public policy later. So turning into this new model and actually working with the government and charging the government gave us like 2 main advantages. Could you put the next slide, please, Naz? One, it was that we now are able to iterate and adapt to what we learn faster. And the second one is that we have been able to attract talent that helped us build like these really advanced technological tools to analyze and gather all this information. So that we couldn't do that with the previous nonprofit model, but we can do it with this one. So what this translates to is we are reaching a lot of people that weren't able to participate in previous platforms or models just online. We are being very efficient, and we are also generating trust and building trust between citizens and governments. And it's easier to scale. By the end of this year we will be in 12 cities in Mexico, and just in this year, and we plan to go to different countries next year. So I would love to further discuss this during the panel, but these are some of the benefits of switching models for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandro. So next we have Vishal Agarwal. Vishal is the founder of Spacial Ideas, an Indian technology firm which develops mapping technologies and location-based services that can be used by governments to provide critical services to citizens. Recently, Spacial Ideas started working with state-level governments in India to produce and analyze data around public health and other government services. Vishal graduated from Amravati University and earned a graduate degree in electrical engineering from Pennsylvania State University. As a former software engineer and product manager, Vishal comes to this space with a very specific lens on both the opportunity and the challenges of working with government. Help me in welcoming Vishal.
Good morning, everyone. Before I show you the next slide, let me begin by saying India is truly a magical country. Whether it's architecture, history, culture, nature, whatever excites you, even if it's jewelry, fashion, people, it's all there. But if you live past the initial euphoria of tourism, the map of India sort of looks like this now. For us, to stay constantly and see the challenges every day we face, it becomes increasingly difficult to just turn a blind eye and not do something about it. So we really basically, one fine day, decided we have to fix it. And we were always looking for opportunities to get a break into working with government. And the moment we got that, we just lapped on it. We basically got an interesting opportunity to meet with a bunch of IAS officers. To people who don't understand that, IAS stands for Indian Administrative Services. So interestingly enough, we have this very, very tough exam which very, very smart people pass, and they sort of help run the government beyond the ministers. We met some ministers also. We met a bunch of NGOs and people who are just dedicated on doing good work in civil society. And all this sort of interactions led us to understand that technology is the only way to solve the problem which we have in India. And interestingly enough, all the people we met, we got convinced that individually, all these people are very passionate, honest, committed individuals who really want to bring about a change. But for some reason, when they come together in a system, that system just doesn't work. So if you meet with them individually, interact, they have wonderful ideas and they really want to take things forward. But as an organization, as a department as a whole, somehow things don't move forward. And the other thing we saw, all of you relate India as an IT hub and everything. We saw that there are wonderful IT companies in India and they do build e-gov solutions. But we saw a very sad disconnect in terms of how people are approaching use of technology in governance. every problem in governance was sort of dissected into different components, and applying technology to just one factor doesn't solve the big problem. So just to give you perspective, if you're trying to solve health using technology, if you just provide somebody mobile tablets to do, village surveys, or if you just track how medicine is being consumed, or if you just do like a mini HMS in the rural health centers, that is not going to solve the health. It is together, all these pieces, when they come together with actionable data in the hand of the stakeholders, is when you will really solve the problem of health. And that is kind of an integrated approach which we have been taking in the areas we decided to work on. So looking at our country, the low-hanging fruits per se, what we saw, interestingly enough, are very fundamental issues: health, sanitation, food, and infrastructure. What we realized that Indian government is spending a lot of money, and there is a lot of dedication and goodwill to do stuff and improve offerings to people. But for some reason, all these different initiatives have the same problem. They are inefficient, they are corrupt, and they're just not reaching and generating the impact they ought to do. So that's when we decided to sort of focus on these 4 areas. And the other thing we realized when we were trying to study how these things function, we saw there are 4 core technology elements which make any of these solutions possible. So these were GIS, because we honestly believe that if you start looking at data in a spatial manner, in a geographical context, your understanding is far greater. Then because we are a 1.2 billion country, biometrics and identifying who's where and what they're doing is also very, very important. And then, of course, smart BI is something which every stakeholder requires, executive decision makers need. And then, interestingly, in our favor, we have sort of, we jumped ahead a lot of countries when we adopted cell phone technology a bit late, So we straight away got into GSM. So even, there are a lot of sort of, funny quotes and whatnot that we have more cell phones than sanitation outlets and whatnot, but everybody has a mobile phone. And interestingly enough, even in the remotest areas, if you don't have a 3G, you have edge, which is good enough for us. So combining all these things, we decided to build a platform for eGov, and we called it, lack of a better word, MOGIS, Mobile Enterprise GIS. Practical dictated it, the domain name was available. So we built this platform, and I'll share you some of the case studies. The first problem we tried to address was sanitation. Now let me give you a picture of what constitutes sanitation. So we have these large dumper trucks which come in and collect garbage. We have these bins which have to be collected. Then this trash has to be taken to the processing station. Now Indians are spoiled for choice, so we don't segregate our waste. So processing station waste segregation is very critical, and because we are not segregating at source, it is very challenging and very, very crucial. And then we have a bunch of people who come out on the streets and clean the streets. So we wanted to connect all these people together in a single sort of dashboard. And if you look closely, that simple map indicates every aspects. How many people came to work, how many trucks were there, which truck picked up which bin at what time, which people came to work. To give you another interesting application we built to solve this. Now, we are inherently very smart people. So what happens is I go and report as person A in an area 1, and then within 20 minutes, I will become person B in an area 2. And I'll try to sort of get paid twice, but probably not even work once. So what we did to enable accountability there, we built a very simple mobile application where we asked people to stand in a group, and one guy would just take a picture, and that's it. That is your attendance. And because we're taking facial pictures, so if that person becomes somebody else, no matter where, our system automatically identifies that Ram Prasad and Shyam Prasad are actually the same guys. So doing these sort of smart improvisations to make sure that the systems don't have loopholes. And the most fascinating thing about finishing this exercise was, when we started it, the city said that we have 45,000 bins. It's impossible to do the survey and identify these bins. So we equipped them with a simple application to do it survey yourself. And you won't believe, after repeated attempts by them to do the survey and increase the bin counts reduced from 45,000 to close to 2,800. And the funny thing is, on top of that, after the system has been put in place, the amount of collection increased by literally 10%. So we reduced the bin count by 20 times, and we increased the collections by 10%. Not just that, because it's a completely digital solution with zero paper consumption, the amount of time and effort it is being saved to do billing and management is just amazing. And the other thing is, because of these attendance systems in place and tracking of vehicles, the city ends up saving tons of money. And interestingly enough, we were recognized for this software as a best smart city initiative by the government of Maharashtra. The next challenge we took on was health. So instead of talking about what we did, and that'll take a lot of time, I'll just share some screenshots of what we have built in health, and I'll leave you with some thought process. So the map you see, the green ones are the pregnant women without anemia. The red dots are pregnant women with anemia. Now, all you gentlemen would know that India faces this challenge of extremely high infant mortality. And then on top of it, we have a very serious problem of female feticide. So how do you fix it? What we believe is that instead of building parallel systems while going the NGO route, we thought if we take the sort of path of equipping the government, which is already spending millions of dollars and doing the same thing, but only just not doing it efficiently, if we equip them with technology, then we can really make a huge difference with minimal amount of spending. So what you're seeing here is a map of all these pregnant women which are actually being provided care by government employees. Not only do you get to see their picture, you get to see what week of pregnancy they are in, you get to see entire history of when the A&Ms or the midwives go and take care of them. We went a step beyond that. We wanted to ensure that the babies who are born actually grow up into healthy children. So how do you ensure vaccination of all the kids on time? Now we made this really cool application for the midwives again, where they take the tab and stand in a village. Whether there's data or no data connectivity, the tab will tell them that wherever you are standing within a 1 kilometer radius, these are the children you need to go and make sure these vaccinations are done with them. So that ensures that people do their job well. Alerts are flashed, SMSs are sent to the right people when overdue vaccinations are there, and so forth. And then these are the kind of indicators we have built. To me, one of the most fascinating indicator is the bubble chart you see at the right bottom. It is actually telling you the average wait time of a patient when they go to rural health hospital. I bet you go to any of the best hospitals and they'll not be able to tell you what is an average wait time of a patient. The first chart is telling you distribution of diseases and whether they are vector-borne, water-borne, so that suddenly if you see on a map that vector-borne diseases in a certain area are very prominent, it could be because there is an industry there which is not following the pollution norms and so forth. And that little map there is the heat map, which is basically showing you where are various diseases occurring, and we have sort of classified diseases into severe, less severe, and so forth. So you get to get an understanding of where to expand your health services, where to build the next hospital, and so forth. So the dream which we have is, imagine this dashboard not for 1 or 2 healthcares, but the entire district, the entire country. I mean, sitting here, if I can actually sort of completely understand that this is the demographic challenges I'm facing, these are the diseases which are alarming, these are the areas where I need to focus. Imagine how many lives one can save and the kind of impact one can generate. So we have just been a year into this, and the journey so far has been quite exciting. And it's just phenomenal to work with such fantastic government officers, because it revives faith back in your country. There are enough good people there, who really want to make a difference. And if you equip them with the right tools, wonderful things do happen. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Vishal. So we've heard from 3 entrepreneurs who've all started businesses with the specific intent of helping citizens relate to government and vice versa, and also to build financial models that are sustainable. And so now we're going to switch slightly to an investor perspective and hear from Paul Miller. Paul is a partner at Bethnal Green Ventures, which is an accelerator program based here in London, which invests in and supports entrepreneurs who are building solutions to social and environmental problems through an intense 3-month program. Paul holds degrees from Nottingham University in physics and Middlesex University in sustainable development. And he comes to us with a perspective on why social ventures or civic startups are necessary to tackle large-scale problems, what they need to get started, and what they face in terms of challenges to success. So welcome, Paul.
Morning, everybody. Yes, I'm Paul, and I help run Bethnal Green Ventures. I'll just give you a quick history of Bethnal Green Ventures, and I'll explain the name to people who are not from London, because it's a bit confusing. So where do we start? We started out running hack weekends and competitions for people who wanted to use digital technology to solve social and environmental problems. And to be honest, it just started because we thought that would be interesting. We had loads of friends who were geeks and engineers and designers, and they were maybe working for a bank or for an advertising agency and not really applying their skills to, problems that they cared about. So we started these weekend events, and they were amazingly successful. And the people would build prototypes and meet team members and all this kind of thing. And we ran 5 of those in the UK. And the model has spread to 25 other countries as well. But there was always a problem. At the end of the weekend, no matter which camp it was, people would come to us and say, right, well, that's great. I've got this prototype, I've got a team. How do I quit my job and turn this into a startup? So we took some of those people and tried to build a program that would be able to support them and turn that prototype into a social venture. And so 2 years ago, we built a prototype of the accelerator program that became Bethnal Green Ventures in Bethnal Green, which is a borough in East London. And we took 6 teams that had come out of social innovation camps, and we took them for 12 weeks on a part-time kind of program, bringing in experienced entrepreneurs, people who'd done it before, and trying to sort of bring them up to speed. They were all first-time entrepreneurs, so bring them up to speed on what it takes to build a social venture. And then at the end of the 12 weeks, 3 of the teams raised investment, which sort of surprised us because they were very, very early stage, but there was obviously demand for these kind of ventures. And then based on that success, we talked to Nesta, who were beginning to get interested in impact investing and creating their own seed investment firm. And I think we're a little bit sort of wondering where was the pipeline of new ventures going to come from for that fund. And we also talked to Google, who had just opened Campus, which is in East London as well, which is their 7-story building that's just meant to support tech startups in London and is a fantastic place. And so we ran the same program, but this time we were able to actually make equity investments into the teams. And so we took 6 teams again, all trying to solve social and environmental problems using tech. And again, it worked very, very well, and half the teams got funded at the end of the program. And I'll come back to some examples from that. And then over the winter last year, the Cabinet Office in the UK created a scheme that's called the Social Incubator Fund, in part to really stimulate this part of the pipeline of social ventures in the UK. And we were awarded one of the first programs to be awarded from that scheme. And so we're now actually funded with half our money comes from the Cabinet Office in the UK and half from Nesta and Nominate Trust, which are both 2 big foundations trying to support innovation in the UK. And we're actually now funded for 4 years and able to do 10 teams every 6 months. So the pace has gone up quite considerably since our first 2 years. Now what we do is we provide £15,000 of investment to each of the 10 teams that we select. We give them this 3-month program of support. We give them 6 months of free office space, and then this network of mentors and investors and also customers, quite importantly. And I think we'll come back to that because those are really important if you're dealing with big public issues. You've got to work out how do you get the government to part with their cash in quite a lot of cases to actually pay for a service. And the program is very simple. It has a weekly rhythm where we bring in an experienced entrepreneur to talk to the teams completely off the record on Mondays, where they can talk about exactly what went right and wrong in their ventures. We run office hours with every team every week, which is sort of like a mini board meeting with every company every week. And then we have a network of 60 mentors who we introduce to the teams based on what problems they're facing at particular times. And it all culminates in Demo Day at the end of the program, where the teams basically present their progress to an audience of investors and people who think they might be able to help the teams. And actually this year we actually had to do 2 because it was oversubscribed. So there's quite a lot of demand for the startups that we're backing at the moment. So we've now backed 22 startups. So I won't go through all of these ones. There's just some examples, but just to give you some of the kinds of things that we've backed. So Mastodon C are a big data startup who do use big data techniques to try and solve social or environmental problems in big data sets. And their main customers are actually now government departments who are using that to using them to find insights in public data. Fairphone has become very successful. So Fairphone are trying to open up the mobile phone supply chain to scrutiny by creating a more ethical mobile phone handset themselves. So they've designed, built, and are now selling a new mobile phone handset, which is not something we thought you could do with £15,000, I admit, when we first invested in them, but it turns out you can. They've now pre-sold over £5 million worth of phones, and the phones are due to be delivered in the next 6 weeks or so. Is Marlene here? I think there she is. Right LaTeX is trying to open up the scientific writing world, and they're one of this year's startups and have grown very, very quickly. They're now at, I think, 35,000 users and growing at 40% a month. Doctor, for example, are working with hospitals to create smart appointment systems for hospitals, and we've learned a lot by working with them about how to do NHS procurement in the UK. Open Utility is a peer-to-peer marketplace for renewable energy. So they're really working in a very, very highly regulated and difficult market, but are making massive progress at the moment. So that's just a few examples of the kinds of startups that we've backed. We ourselves are both a not-for-profit and a for-profit, which I can explain a bit more maybe later. But we take people invest in us. So our main limited partner actually is Nesta, and Jeff's here, so I have to be careful what I say. And if we were to make a return on our investments in the startups, then they too would make a return as well. But the majority of any return from that we would get from our investments would actually be recycled into the next generation of startups. We've set it up deliberately that way. So it's actually the entrepreneurs that we back are sort of paying it forward into the next generation of startups. Hope that helps.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul. Okay, so we've got about 35 minutes, and I wanted to just kick off the panel, but would really like this to be interactive, so please be thinking about your questions, and I think we'll have a roving microphone shortly. All right, great, thanks. So first of all, just to kick us off, so Vishal, Alejandro, Keya, and I went to the pub across the street last night after the event. Paul, unfortunately, since he's based here in London, actually had to work, so couldn't join us. But so it's difficult to recreate the atmosphere of the pub here, but suffice it to say that lots of stories were shared, and there was a lot of empathy going around for the challenges of being a startup entrepreneur. But one thing that was really striking to me was the common lament that all of you shared that basically said that, you know, all the people close to you, and in particular your parents, you know, and I'll paraphrase this liberally, but basically said, why are you bothering with this civic mission? You know, if you're going to build a company, why not just go out and sell to businesses? Why are you banging your head against the wall trying to do something civic and make money at the same time? So while we've exposed you to a group therapy session here, let me just maybe start with Keya and ask you to share a little bit about kind of your personal motivations for doing this work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think as you kind of shared in the description, my own personal history has always been in policy and politics. So kind of international human rights work, a lot of domestic political campaign work in the US. And during that time, I had the opportunity to observe firsthand a lot of problems and areas that I always kind of knew that I wanted to return to. So kind of in my core experience, my DNA, how I'm motivated as a person, that was what was always up front for me. So any career path, any project, any way that I ever considered investing my time always had that notion at the forefront. And then the question is, well, okay, if you kind of decide to commit full time to pursuing one particular avenue, why decide to structure it in this particular way, in a for-profit way? I think that the kind of structure of the question itself is really interesting to me. So, and the way I've dissected it, as I've thought a lot about that question is, I think it's a very common reaction to look at a for-profit and make an immediate assumption, which is you've decided to operate in an arena that is constrained, and it is constrained by your imperative to make money. So if you really cared about mission, why are you tying yourself to this imperative to make money? It's a distraction, it's going to drag you down. Ultimately, it's going to sort of tear this apart, right? How are you going to concentrate on mission when you have to make money? And I really like to kind of flip that assumption on its head and think about that choice and the alternative. So what is the alternative? Well, the alternative would be a nonprofit, I suppose, right? It's either for-profit or non. And the assumption there is that the non in front of profit means free from the constraint of profit. So it's like, the question really is, why are you choosing to put yourself in a constrained environment to pursue mission versus this unconstrained one, no need to make profit, rainbows and unicorns? And what I like to come back to, and it's really articulated best by this TED Talk by Dan Pallotta, if anyone has the chance to watch it, I highly recommend it, where he articulates all of the constraints that face those who've taken the nonprofit route. The constraint against going to capital markets for funding, the constraint against compensating your best people at market rates, the constraints against taking sort of any revenues that you might be generating through your practice and reinvesting in marketing and advertising and scaling infrastructure. So I just think that every environment is one of constrained optimization in which you're trying to sort of do the best by your mission, given the structure that you've picked. And the imperative to make profit, yes, it's a constraint, but I don't think it's mission debilitating. I think in many, many ways, it's mission advancing.
And Alejandro, as someone who has built both a nonprofit and a for-profit, do you actually encounter the opposite criticism, which is, why are you trying to make money instead of pursuing a social mission?
Yes, of course. There's, at least in Mexico, there's a huge stigma on having a social mission, but being a for-profit or a hybrid. And when I started telling people, they said, "Oh, it's so sad you sold out." And it was like, I'm not selling out. I'm actually working on the same thing. I just found another way to achieve higher impact. And for me, the question was like, I started with a nonprofit. I was full-time on it, but I saw how very talented people came, volunteered, or working with us for like a couple of months, but then had to go out and get like real jobs. And my parents were asking the same thing: when are you getting a real job? And I saw that coming. I said, okay, this can't go on like forever like this. It will, like, sometime I will have to like live this working and volunteer on the weekends or something and get a real job. So for us, the only way to actually keep the talent and attract more talent, and for myself to keep doing something I loved and to achieve higher impact, was switching models and actually developing this really high tech to keep growing. Not like probably right now or a few months from now, I would be like doing something else.
Vishal, you started Spacial Ideas in 2009 as a commercial company, not necessarily working with governments at all. And so, what was behind your thinking to actually take existing technology and staff and readdress your assets towards government? And also, how has your staff, your team, responded to that shift?
So Spacial Ideas, as the name suggests, we always wanted to be a mapping company. And one of the goals we had was to come back to India and change how mapping can revolutionize e-governance. We formed the company EasyPart. We were founders, CEOs, EasyPart, and we just had no clue what to do next. How to get going, how to get business, how to actually approach a government official. Had zero clue. So one thing which we're very smart with was pivoting. So we got on to LinkedIn, and because of having a decent work record, I literally started interacting with people on LinkedIn, whoever was looking for a GIS developer, and saying, hey, we'll do it for you. And interestingly enough, we got a lot of opportunities to work with some fantastic companies in Australia, Europe, US. We helped a US company execute one of those E911 projects. So while we were doing this, we always had this inclination of, how do we sort of do the same thing in our own country? But we still had no clue, because it is not very systematic. I can't just go on a website and pick up the phone and call the person and he'll say, yeah, come and meet me. We were not sure whether these things work. Interestingly enough, we were helping a company in India do tree census management. So we were providing them technology support for it. And that led to a very interesting meeting with a much more interesting officer. And he, after looking at the software, says in a very condescending manner, nice software, do you make software? I said, yes. Will you make one for me? I said, sure. And he calls me on a weekend, which is kind of a big no-no. But I said, let's see, it'll be an interesting discussion. And so he makes me wait for 2 hours, which is kind of annoying. But sat past that, and that's when sort of life literally changed for us. Because when he explained his problems and his passion came out as to how these people are committed about bringing a change. And then we just latched on that opportunity and we never looked back. Now, interestingly enough for us, because all these 2.5 years before we got into working with government, we had to make sort of survive. I was bad with savings when I was in States. So we had to sort of make money. The business had to make money. So interestingly enough, we use our expertise in LinkedIn and social media, and we created this sort of an online reputation management product, which is making us decent revenues. So the pressure on us to, from day one, make money off the government wasn't there. And then it became more of a sort of a very, interesting enough, a selfish motivation of inner peace and joy to see a city completely change based on the technology we were offering was far more rewarding, and the other business was making money, so it wasn't that we were not able to pay salaries or anything like that. And even interestingly, the team which joined me also saw the joy in the impact they were bringing. So nobody really sort of got onto the route of looking at it as a very, very commercial organization and just focusing on the remuneration and so forth. So we have been able to retain the team, and I think all of us are very excited how city after city we are able to sort of work. And the best part about working with government in India and these officers are the more honest and progressive officers get transferred sooner, which is meeting and working with a CEO and knowing that he's going to head another company in 1.5 to 2 years. So you are now sort of, your business development sort of, becomes easier with time progressing, because all you need is 15, 20 good people, and they're going to just move into every city. And slowly when you start building these models, how long can you be ignorant to information sharing, Like, I loved what people had written today, transparency is an idea whose time has come. So that's the same thing when people tell us, why are you working with government and all that. The way we say it is that for India, time is now. If it doesn't adopt such technology and solution, its sort of golden age of having such a vast population of youth is just going to be undone and nothing's going to happen. So that keeps us going at it.
Thank you. So Paul, I want to get you in on the conversation here. Vishal mentioned the difficulty at first of getting into government as a customer and not knowing sort of where to go and how to do that. Can you talk a little bit about your experience coaching companies at Bethnal Green Ventures around doing that?
Sure. Well, so I think that the thing to say is that over the 3 years we've been doing this and previously is that there's just a trend towards more openness to startups amongst government departments and public agencies. And so we've basically seen them getting better and better, but slowly, at working with startups. And essentially, I think one interesting thing is that you find the right person in the public body that you're trying to work with, and that's got to be somebody who's really passionate about changing that place. And you basically then, the startup becomes a lobbying tool for that person to achieve change within their organization. So they can see something that is possible if they were to work with this startup that isn't at the moment. And then that person has to build a coalition of the willing inside the organization to actually use that startup. And so that's, for example, doctor with hospitals. That's exactly how they work. They find the right person in the hospital who can see how much waste is going on because the appointment system isn't saving money for them. That person then has to get the right people in the hospital on board, and then once that hospital is on board, then they're very happy to recommend it to other hospitals. So it's a slowly catchy monkey, but we're getting better at it over time. And I think also public bodies are getting better at it over time as well.
This issue about governments being willing to work with startup companies is one that has certainly been in the forefront in the U.S. Lately with the launch of healthcare.gov and the controversy that some of you may be aware of around the difficulty of launching that site and whether or not startup IT companies could participate in providing IT products and services to government in a more efficient, more effective, and more cost-efficient way. And one of the issues that comes up is around risk-taking in government and the fact that there's a perception that by working with large institutional companies, you're actually mitigating or reducing risk when in fact the opposite may be true, where experimental approaches and working with small startups on small projects for smaller amounts of money may be actually less risky than embarking on these large projects. And Alejandro, I wondered if you had perspectives on that and whether when you were starting to sell to governments, how much that issue of working with a startup and taking risk was a positive or a negative?
Yes, and that's why we focused our strategy on this public innovators that are just the same type of people Paul was mentioning. And we found out that, at least in Mexico, it's people that work within government, but they have backgrounds in academia or the private sector or the third sector. So they are willing to take more risks and they are willing to actually innovate and they really want to achieve change. So that makes them able to hire a small startup instead of going with a huge companies. And for us, one thing that was key was starting small and building little success stories. So once you get to the government official, you're not pitching a new idea, a new radical idea, and a multi-million-dollar project. You start small and you say, okay, we can make this work, and then scale it up from that. And then they'll see that it's not so risky after all, and you can learn from each stage.
And Keya, your company started out actually working with government officials as a potential customer, and you've made a shift over time to actually working with media companies in order to fulfill your mission. Could you talk a little bit about your thought process around that business model or that shift of business model between government as a customer versus media or other ways of generating revenue in the space?
Yes. So in past iterations of the company, we weren't working with government in quite the same way that Alejandro or Vishal do. So it wasn't with administrations or agencies. It was really on the political side, working with elected officials and trying to open up clearer channels to constituents to communicate information and to engage. And for us, the experience was actually fairly difficult, which is one of the reasons why we slowly over time have transitioned out. And it was very much centered around the idea that Alejandro just articulated, which is one of early adopters. So kind of one of the most important things as a startup is to find that critical core contingency of who is going to be most receptive to your ideas and able to work in some capacity at the pace that you are ready and willing and prepared to work. And that is going to be the spark that allows you to have that initial success story that then allows you to kind of grow beyond the initial customer set. So for us, kind of elected officials, and we are specifically in the US looking at state level legislators, so one level down from national. simply didn't have the background, the resources, the purchasing cycle to be an effective first customer for us. So we have kind of left that for the time being, moved into a customer base that is more organizational, so kind of issue advocacy or organizations is our main customer base now. They do work on much shorter kind of purchasing schedules. They have much bigger budgets to participate in the services that we offer, and we are building those case studies that show how effective it can be for communication and for engagement to be part of our platform. And I think that is what is going to allow us to then go back to some of the folks that weren't the best first customers and bring them into the fold down the road.
Terrific. So I want to open it up to the audience now for questions and discussion. Please. And there's a microphone coming around, I think. Gentleman in the white shirt. Yeah.
Okay. My name is Sean Igbinde. I have a startup in Lagos called Budget. Interestingly, I'm very interested in this section because it talks about civic entrepreneurs. And for my organization, one thing we have struggled with is we don't want to be a non-profit startup. We want to have an hybrid model. But sometimes it gets confusing because when you're trying to balance both, then you might run into some trouble. I think we have run into some trouble once before, and I will explain. What we do is that we take budgets and we put them into infographics so people who don't understand the budget at all can know what it is all about, and we do interactive applications, just a budget simplification startup. Then we got a job from government to say, we know you're doing something amazing, we have some problem at our data end, can you come and build some softwares for us, can you come and do some work for us? And we felt like, we're trying to do an hybrid model, basically, so we got engaged to do some work for them. DFID paid for it, and it was still interesting at that point, because DFID was going to pay for it. That means the procurement was straight. That means the contract fees just came straight to us, and we didn't need to talk to anybody. When it got to the next level, and government says, can you help us still do the same work? We would now pay for this. You get? Then it doesn't look like it's ethical. It's no more ethical. Then it goes against the transparency, the accountability, the way it's going to be structured. So just to show the dilemma of when you're trying to run an hybrid model, and you're doing a transparency project, and if you're not careful and the government becomes your client, then you might run into some trouble. We had to stop the project at that point. Another thing, so now what we do is corporate. So we focus only on corporate. We do infographics for corporate and also development partners. Thank you.
Interesting. Would anyone like to comment on that? Perhaps Vishal?
Yeah, so it is, always interesting when you are working for profit for the government. So I think there are two principles which we keep in mind when we are engaging the government. A, it doesn't matter whoever you are in government, our solutions would not give you any loopholes. It'll adhere to the highest standards. B, when it comes to costing, what we make sure is that internally we are not driven, impact comes first, money comes second. So I remember in one conference somebody asked me, so what is the cost of this software? I said it depends upon how nice the commissioner or the collector is. And we still stand by it, because the best thing for us is because we are not building bridges or buildings, we are a bunch of young engineers building software. And once we have built it, whether like Microsoft now gives you Word for free or charges you money is, on their goodness, right? So same applies to us in some sense. I mean, and we are realizing it early on and not waiting for 30, 40 years before we start giving software for education institutes for free. So if an officer is there who really wants to, make a difference, who cares about the money from day one, So that's sort of been a fairly sort of decent approach so far for us.
I'd like to add something. For us, we tried to find like a very simple mechanism that didn't leave like for us to think, this guy's a good guy, this guy isn't so good, he's kind of corrupt, so we can't work with him. So we said that isn't sustainable in the long run. What is a condition that every one of our clients has to stand by, that it's everything that we gather or that we process has to be made public. in the end. So if they give you data for an infographic, you will publish that data as well. So at first, that for us, that filters out a lot of potential clients, but we think that this will build a reputation in the long run, that the citizen can trust that if we manage the data, it will be like real, and that they will have access to all the information that we gave to the government as well.
Other questions?
Hi, Larry Sperling from the Department of State, United States. This is a very important discussion. I walked in late, unfortunately, but I wanted to put out a question to everyone, which is, how can the Open Government Partnership engage entrepreneurs in a more robust way in the partnership, and both as generators of solutions and demandeurs of more open government to assist governments in meeting their commitments, and take the opportunity to just put in a little plug. We're going to do a meeting just after this, 12:45 to 2 p.m., and you can bring your lunch here on this floor in bilateral meeting room 3, the Byron, to begin a discussion and to launch an informal process that will continue to begin to give some thought to how we can enhance private sector engagement, both large companies as well as SMEs and startups, which is an incredibly important component, and has a lot to bring to the OGP.
Great, thank you for that comment. I would say, first of all, that at summits like this that bring the opportunity together and raise awareness for the fact that private sector does have an important role to play in the sector, both startup companies and larger companies, as we heard from Dr. Ibrahim this morning. So I'd love to hear thoughts from any of the panelists on specific and tangible ways that OGP might help any of you in your businesses or ideas you have for making those connections. Sure. Paul.
So one of the things that we've always found governments can do in this field is be clear about problems. So in some ways, to the outside world, it's actually quite hard to work out what's going on in government. Obviously, opening it up is part of that, but actually just being clear and specific about what the problems that particular agencies face is one of the big steps forward in terms of like how do you then work with a startup or a company to try and solve that problem. So that's the key thing for me, is working out ways of being clear about the problems that you face, so as then you can work with startups to try and solve them.
I also, the other day at the Civil Society Day, there was this debate about thorny issues, about the NSA and Snowden and all that going on. And I see that it's possible that people might be afraid of data mining, that it's as a technology, it might only be used for spying or doing things that us as citizens don't want. So I think it's very important for the OGP to actually lead the debate on what we can do with open data and big data. And so for us, for the starting companies that are using big data and using data mining for other purposes, we can work there in the future and not being shut down because of fear or of the bad consequences of data mining. So leading up the debate and opening these sort of spaces to tell like another part of the story is very valuable.
I also wanted to add a small thing. The challenges we look at in various countries are invariably very similar. Any developing economy, the challenges we see in India are similar in Indonesia or similar in Africa. The funniest thing was looking at this talk yesterday where it was Nikhil from MKSS and Timoon from some organization in Liberia, and how they were doing exactly the same thing on sharing information with people. So what I mean to say is that if OGP can start dedicating time and effort very early on to build a technology platform which OGP countries can participate on. Like, for example, don't wait for 10, 20 years and then start working on a World Wide Web consortium or an Open Geospatial consortium. Why not engage, startups for a change and help, and let us help you build a technology platform so all OGP countries who say want to share information can just marry into that platform, and then because later on you run into this problem of information collation and analysis and different dispersed databases and different technology platforms. Why not sort of think early on about that, and that way it becomes a very exciting opportunity for OGP countries to benefit from the membership that they immediately inherit and gain advantage from with time over the years, the platform which we build. And then because everybody will be on the same sort of stack, talking across each other would be very easy.
And in the spirit of putting in plugs, let me just add that Global Integrity, which is one of Omidyar Network's grantees, has been serving in a role as leader of a networking mechanism between technologists and governments to figure out kind of what those problems are and what technologies might be available to solve them. So look for Nathaniel Heller here at the conference if you're interested in that connection. More questions?
I've got the mic.
Oh.
Sorry.
That's a good strategy.
Philip Schmidt. I'm at the MIT Media Lab, and I've founded both a nonprofit and a for-profit company. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the concerns you may have with starting a for-profit organization. And you didn't specifically, I think, describe yourselves as startups, but with startups, for example, pivoting and failure are two of the most important things about startups. Both of those would really concern me if it deals with citizen or government data. And in a way, it's actually a question for Stacy also. How do you ensure, if you're investing in a for-profit company, that the mission, that they will stay on track with their mission, that your investment will not end up making Facebook richer 10 years down the line?
Sure. So happy to start and then love people to chime in. So when we're looking at investments in the for-profit space, we look very closely at mission alignment and entrepreneur alignment. So the underlying focus of the founder and the management team is extremely important. And as Keya mentioned earlier, the business models where the actual revenue model is completely congruent with the social mission are the best types of models, because there, everything you do to enhance revenue is also enhancing your impact, and you don't have that tension. Those models are hard to find, and so there absolutely is tension in a lot of the organizations that we look to invest in between the drive to create sustainability and to stay on mission. And we acknowledge that. We look also very much at board representation and governance as a way to help ensure that the mission of the company is aligned with social impact and does not get diverted towards purely commercial means that might be in conflict with the social mission. But it's a great question. Anyone else want to comment on that?
I mean, I think we have to accept that there are lots of unknowns in this area. So one, for us as an early stage investor, is like, how are we going to get our money out at the end? So in a straightforward tech for-profit investment firm, you've got exits, whether those are IPOs or acquisitions and so on. And there's not really any track record of that happening in the social space yet. So we don't know what's going to happen there. But what I would say is that I think there are two areas that are growing very fast, which I think are interesting. One is impact investment. So, the whole ecosystem in terms of later stage investment is growing very quickly, and there's lots of nuance in there. And then also is the growth of ethical investment, as in, big pension funds and so on, having a portion of their portfolio that they want to invest into things that they see as having low ethical risk. And I think the two coming together, the impact investment, which is about new things growing, and then ethical investment, which is about holding stocks that are both profitable but don't have any sort of ethical problems. I think those two things coming together is probably where we'll see something something fruitful in this world, but not this year. That's like a 5 to 10 year thing.
And
Go ahead.
Please.
It's interesting what Stacy mentioned about as an investor looking for founder alignment in the organizations that you're investing in, I think there's a kind of flip side responsibility on the part of the entrepreneur as well, is to really seek out those kinds of investors who have the mission alignment, because you're going to be working together for quite some time, and there are going to be myriad of pressures on the organization over the course of failures and pivots. And to tie yourself from the outset to someone who has an aligned set of values also helps kind of keep the company on track towards the mission, rather than, oh, well, there's an exit opportunity with Facebook, let's just take that.
And that's a real challenge, because there isn't a large set of investors today who have that mission alignment and commercial interest. And Paul, I'm sure you've experienced that as well, as you're looking for the companies who come out of the incubator to find incremental funding. There aren't a lot of institutions out there today doing that.
No, there's not a lot, but it is growing. That's the most interesting thing, is that, I mean, it's certainly, we had double the interest in our startups coming out of demo day this year than we did last year, and that's happening a lot now.
Yes. Okay, questions? More, so many. Chris.
My question, Chris Spence from the National Democratic Institute. My question can be quick. What's the role of open source technology in social innovation and in startup space?
I can take it. Huge. I can't begin to thank Google, for example, for Google Maps. Then there is GeoServer, which is a fantastic technology. Then you have databases, Postgres and whatnot. I mean, honestly, a lot of these things which have been made possible would not be possible if I had to buy an ESRI license to begin with. I mean, I sincerely believe that that is the way to go. And it would be amazing if we can reach a level where what we are doing in one or two sort of, districts can also be open sourced and, in some way have government adopt in a bigger way. So that definitely is the way forward, I think.
Yes, it's the same for us. Hadoop, for example, has allowed us to really tackle huge data sets without having to buy a single server. So,
Yeah.
so that's been great for us. And also, we are like an active part of the open source community. So it's always important to keep giving back and be active.
I have to add another anecdote from one of our experiences. There used to be this company called Face.com, which had a technology of facial recognition, and Facebook bought them. We got screwed. So we were using Face.com to do facial recognition for the little application I explained, and one fine day they announced that Facebook is buying them and shutting down the APIs. So, where is your do no evil and whatnot? So it's very important. Thankfully, there was OpenCV, which is an open source technology for facial recognition. So we could lean back on that. So it is very important, so I like, for example, imagine if Google starts charging for Google Maps. I mean, OpenStreetMaps is great, but it's not reached that level yet. So it is very important for larger organizations also to support the cause and not buy great companies and shut them down,
You were waiting patiently. Okay, great.
Okay. Hello, my name is Aris Kotsakis from Ministry of Finance Greece, Reform Team, and I would like to submit a question to the panelists. Are you willing to broadcast, either to broadcast or to export your technology for national level implementation and localization? And if yes, which would be an API, a possible API for national localization purposes?
So so localization has been sort of ingrained in whatever we do from day one, because India, though is one country, it's like many countries within that. We have that challenges even when we are working in different states. In terms of APIs, yes and no. Some of them you can enable, some of them you can't, because what we see is no two government offices are the same. So there always will be this scope of some customization and tweaking. But that said, we completely believe in a cloud-enabled technology stack, so that you can have tentacles or APIs so that other people can latch onto it and sort of, the information can be shared across very, very quickly. Like I remember when we did this press release with the sanitation effort, all the newspaper journalists had only one request: can we have this map of sanitation publicly available? They did not do that, sadly, but so localization is something we are always thought through, and yes, cloud is the way to go so that, different devices and different people can then use that information in a more interesting manner.
Thank you. We are going to contact you.
Thanks. Thank you.
I don't want to ignore the side of the room, so who wanted to speak? Gentleman in the back?
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Louis Saint-Arnaud from Foreign Affairs Canada. Yesterday I've attended a panel on high-tech and low-tech approaches to open government. I was simply curious to hear you on possible business models in a low-tech environment for civic entrepreneurship. Thanks.
Well, for us, it's not really about high-tech and low-tech. It's about reaching different kinds of population and making it really inclusive. So actually, to reach the most marginalized populations, we have to use in the end more high-tech. So what we do is we reach them through their own neighbors or through SMS. And in the end, that when you're analyzing all the data, you have to, it's more expensive to process SMS and to pay for the SMS service, for example, than to just make a form in a website. And for us to analyze all those videos has implied a lot of research and speech recognition software and all the stuff that makes us go really into high tech in order for people to participate in a way that's natural for them and to be able to engage with their governments just by speaking to a neighbor. So our aim is to be inclusive, to reach the people who don't have access to tech, but sometimes you have to invest more in high tech to do that.
I think we're almost out of time, but let's take one more question. Lady in yellow.
Hi, thanks very much. Thank you also for very interesting presentations. My question is to Keya. I was interested that you were talking about dealing with the media and this whole notion of the sponsored debates. My question is, could you maybe give us an example of such a debate, and more importantly, how do you make the money? Who's paying for what? So you're commissioning somebody to write an article, and the other thing is, when we talk about media, are you just looking at print media, or are you looking at television, radio, whatever? I live in South Africa, and one of the big issues is the sustainability of print media, and particularly how to generate revenue. And a lot of the times, people, you're finding that they're buying more and more space. So it's bought space as opposed to investigative, free journalism. And it's like, how do you kind of change that course? Or how can you kind of add a little bit of the neutral voice? And the media is so powerful in terms of what it can do in this arena around transparency and accountability. Yeah?
Absolutely, thank you. I know we're short on time, so if we need to continue this conversation afterwards, I'm more than happy to do that. But just to hit a few of the questions you asked. So an example of a sponsored debate. So I mentioned we're pretty early in rolling out this platform. So our first paper, so it is print media, but the online version. So it's the Philadelphia Inquirer in the city of Philadelphia. We started with the issue of education, so local public education, which is a huge problem right now in the city. The district is underfunded, they're negotiating teacher contracts. And so we had two organizations, one from either side of that debate. One is called PenCan, they're a charter school kind of reform organization, and the other is the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers, which is the teachers union. And so what they do is purchase the space on the article. It is not in the article, it is not part of the article, there's a line and it lives below it, where they can write side-by-side commentary on what should be the next steps in the negotiation of the teacher's contract, for example. How should the school district go about funding the $50 million budget gap that they have to run the public schools for the year? And so you have these kind of differing perspectives that offer their ideas for solutions, their ideas for next steps, very different from each other, but that live side by side on articles about that topic. So that is how it is presented to the user. To get to some of your other questions, right now it is quote unquote print only. These debates don't appear in the actual paper version of newspapers. They appear in the online version of newspapers, but we're not at the point yet where we're on television, radio, or other forms of broadcast media, although in some of the conversations we're having with these media outlets, we do hope to diversify and get there. And I think you mentioned, I don't know if this is exactly what you're talking about, but kind of the trend in media houses to sell essentially articles to sponsors. So it's called native advertising or content marketing. For those who aren't familiar, it's the kind of most promising business model or the trend of the moment right now for media. And what it involves is actually selling the main content on the page to a brand sponsor. So they write the article, or actual journalists in-house at the media organization write this article on behalf of a paying customer. And so one of the reasons why I'm very optimistic about this kind of unit that we have created is that it brings really high value sponsorship to a news article's page without selling the article. So the article itself stands, it is written by the journalist, it tackles the issue, and what you have attached to it, yes, is sponsored debate, but it is additional perspectives that kind of add a layer to the article reading experience and a monetization stream. So we can talk more about it, but that's what we're trying to do.
Great. Well, we are out of time. I want to thank everyone for coming to the panel and thank our panelists very much for really engaging dialogue.
Thank you, Stacy.